Hello, and welcome back to another episode of Critical Reactions with your host, Bryan. We're going to continue on with this week's theme of hip hop, pushing me a bit outside of my comfort zone as I explore a genre that I have very little experience with. So far, the week has been very enlightening, checking out Kendrick Lamar and clipping. Today, we're going to be looking at Little Simz. The song's called Introvert. And I do want to put a heads up, I just got done recording this exact reaction, and apparently I never hit the record button. So if it seems like I'm making very quick progress in understanding the lyrics, I literally just went through them. I have a pretty strong understanding of what's going on here. So the analysis may be a bit quicker than usual as I try to remember all my thoughts that I had previously and re-hitting on them. So let's dive into Little Simz' Introvert. Yeah, so we start off with a militaristic snare march, and we have these very triumphant brass going on behind it. Yeah, this whole section is it's very empowering. It feels like victory is right at hand. Very chill. Nice string swell.
The kingdom's on fire, the blood of a young Messiah. I see sinners in a church, I see sinners in a church. Sometimes I might be introvert, there's a war inside. I hear battle cries, mothers burying sons, young boys playing with guns. The devil's a liar, fulfill your wildest desires. Now I don't wanna be the one to doctor this, but if you can't feel pain, then you can't feel the opposite. The fight between the yin and yang's a fight you'll never win. I study humans, that makes me an anthropologist. I'm not into politics, but I know it's dark times. Parts of the world still living in apartheid. But if I don't take this winner's flight, that's career suicide. Though I should have been a friend when your grandma died.
There's a lot of diversity in the music here.
In her bed, I see her soul rising as her body gets closer to death.
A slight tempo shift while we bring back the intro. We got that nice simplified drum kit, hi-hat work.
And I'm not trying to be healed. I sabotage what you're trying to build, cause the feelings I keep aside, but it's time to reveal. I hate the thought of just being a burden. I hate that these conversations are surfaced. Sim's an artist or Sim be the person. To you I'm smiling, but really I'm hurting. I dedicate my life and gave my heart over 20-something years, left wondering how I even feel, but was it even worth
nice
it?
Little piano line coming in, and new layers are being added every few bars. A little bit of a flute there.
But to happiness I'm the furthest. At night I wonder if my tears will dry on their own. Hoping I will fulfill Amy's purpose. Angel said don't let ego be a disturbance. In the demon said motherfucker you earn this. Like they strip you of everything you're deserving. Realize there is a prison and nasty and conditioned as fuck. Man, it's like they can't sleep till our spirit is crushed. How much fighting must we do? We've been fearless enough. Always seen as broken homes here in poverty. Corrupt government officials, lies and atrocities. How they talking almost threatening the economy. Knocking down communities to re-up on properties. I'm directly affected, it does more than just bother me. Look beyond the surface, don't just see what you wanna see. My speech ain't involuntary, projecting attention straight from my lungs. I'm a black woman and I'm a proud one. We walking blind, faith not knowing the outcome. But as long as we're unified, then we've already won.
Yeah, so there's a lot more energy in the verses that was always bring the tempo down heading into the chorus. Real harsh transition though. Yeah, real calming right here. Very introspective. Drastic change from the bombastic marching element we saw earlier, or heard earlier, I should say. Even bringing the strings back in, it's a much lighter idea.
And so it begins. The bass is an amalgamation of everything. Rules are not to be played by rebels. The story of never ending. Your introversion led you here. Intuition protected you along the way. Feelings allowed you to be well balanced. And perspective gave you foresight.
Yeah, bringing that together there sounds so clean.
Only the strong will survive. Only the strong will survive.
We have a nice variation on our intro idea. Much slower, and it feels like it's slowing down.
Your truth unveiled with time. As you embark on a journey of what it takes to be a woman.
All right. So, musically, there's a lot of really cool ideas going on in here. We actually have 4 distinct sections in here that all kind of have their own vibe to them, and they move through a variety of different emotions, a lot of contrasting elements. When we start off, we have our opening militaristic snare idea that's paired with this bombastic brass vamping between two chords, and violins come in to kind of give it this massive victorious feeling to it, right? Interestingly, the brass come in and they hit a note, they drop down, bum, 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 bum. They come down to this lower note, bum, 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 and they vamp back up to it, right? So they just kind of bounce back and forth between these 2 key notes, right? We have a little bit of movement between them, but we stay on the 2 notes primarily. And what those 2 notes provide is resolution and tension. And resolution and tension, we just bounce back and forth between them. It's actually a very well thought out chord movement between them. It provides exactly what I think the song needs in those moments. It doesn't need to have a complex emotional journey. It's about finding home and coming back down, creating tension, and resolving back to that home, feeling that resolution again, and just kind of bouncing back and forth between those ideas. It's driving, right? We move from consonants to tension, back to consonants. It's just this back and forth. It does a lot for driving the momentum of the track, while also incorporating the feelings of in order to be victorious, you have to have hurdles to overcome, right? Well, I would say in order for the victory to mean something, you need hurdles to overcome. You need to make the journey difficult so that the reward, or so that, getting through the journey and completing it is rewarding. And that's where the tension comes in, right? After this, though, we move into the first verse, and this one's a bit more pared down. It has a bit more energy to it. I mentioned that bombastic, militaristic part has a lower tempo, and we feel it when we move into it after the choruses. Out of the verses. The song feels like it just shudders to a slower tempo real quick, and it's probably only like 5 or 10 beats per minute. It's not a lot, but it's just enough for you to feel that we've shifted, we've slowed down just a little bit, and so the verse has a bit more speed to it tempo-wise. It's also a bit more muted. It doesn't have this bombastic element to it. It's quieter, right? Occasionally, well, not occasionally, we have the drum bit to it, the drum kit section, and occasionally we'll add on extra layers. We'll toss in a little bit of strings or a little bit of the brass or some other instrument, the flute, There's all sorts of different layers that get added on there, and we typically bring them in to emphasize specific elements. They provide intensity. Each layer creates tension. And a lot of that also comes from the lyricist, from Little Simz herself. When she really starts putting the passion behind her words and starts leaning into specific beats or syllables or entire phrases, we can hear the intensity of the music rising not just from her vocally delivering more intensity, but also through the music, which is adding more and more layers, making it feel larger and more tense. And the opposite is true as well when she wants to pull it back a little bit and kind of bring the intensity down, maybe a bit more introspective. We start removing layers, right? And there's a lot of different layers that get utilized. It makes the verses sound extremely dynamic because I don't think there's any section other than the completely pared down foundation where we hear the same combinations of layers as we've heard previously. It's always a different combination of layers. So it adds a dynamic element to the verses as well because the music feels like it's constantly changing, even though it's not. The foundational idea is identical. But it's this concept of linear momentum that I think works very well, especially for hip hop. This is something that when we checked out Kendrick Lamar, I mentioned that he kind of has one beat per song. He kind of had a little bit different idea that goes on during his choruses, but during the verses, he had one style that kind of fit for the entire song, and it was something that I wasn't a big fan of. And it has nothing to do with Kendrick or hip hop. This is the same comment I've made about some black metal and post rock and all sorts of genres that utilize single concepts with little variation. I'm not a real big fan of it on a personal, casual listening level. So I really appreciate that at least in this song, Little Simz brings a lot of dynamic quality to the underlying element. All of these, all the hip hop songs we've listened to this week so far, and most of the stuff I've listened to in the past, what little that might be, there's a lot of dynamic element in the vocal performance. Changing up rhythmic cadences, changing up rhyming schemes, like the dynamic element in the lyrics themselves are impressive, but the music rarely reflects that. In my experience, again, I want to make that clear. I have not listened to a lot of hip hop, but what I've been exposed to is it's more lyrically driven. And I like how, despite this song definitely having the lyrics in the spotlight for a majority of it, the music is not, or the music is given the same sort of attention, even though it's not the most important aspect of the song. And it's given that same dynamic quality that the lyrics are given. I really enjoy that. We move into the chorus, and it's a bit more chill, more restrained, right? We have the clean vocals that have sort of this angelic, calming element to it. For some reason, it reminds me of like 2000 style girl groups, stuff like Destiny's Child. For some reason, like that's where my mind went. Very cool. But it's kind of paired that with just more calming and what seems to be more pensive style writing and chord progression. It's lost the momentum. It's lost the bombastic element, the larger than life, the victory, the sort of militaristic concept. All of that has been traded away for something that feels more personal and vulnerable and sort of just introspective, looking inside oneself. And then this bleeds into the bridge, which takes this concept and runs with it by adding more layers. I believe this is where the flute comes in. There is a synth that provides a calming melody line, and it sort of just ramps up all of the emotions that we had in the chorus up to the next level. It just brings in more layers there. And then finally, it's a variation of, so I didn't really include it. I said 4 sections, intro, verse, chorus, bridge, but there is a variation of the intro that we hear right at the very end, where we have a slowing down of ideas. I think it's even slower than the section typically is, and the instrumentation has changed so that the brass isn't giving us that big bombastic thing. It's something else. I don't remember what it is. But we get this little variation. We've shifted the line from one voice to another, and we've shifted the tempo down even more so. And it's really interesting. So, like I said, I really enjoyed the dynamic element here. There's a lot of things in the music that keep my attention, whereas it's something that I have had a problem with engaging in the past. One of my big problems with hip hop is that, well, let me again express my problem with the hip hop I've been exposed to in the past, why it doesn't stick with me, why I don't typically look for it in my casual listening, is because of the repetition in the music. The first time I listen to a song, I'm typically listening to music only, and I understand that that is the wrong way to go about listening to hip hop. It is a lyrically focused genre. It is something I'm trying to work on, but I'm trying to break 20 years of listening habits. So I had it kind of drilled in me to pay attention to musical ideas. And, I do listen to the rhythmic components and some of the rhyming ideas, the syllabic concepts in the lyrics, but I don't typically listen to the words. The message in hip hop on a first time listen is typically lost on me. Right? I'm usually looking for the message in the music, and I can apply that to the lyrics later, which, surprise, surprise, is still how I'm going about this. I did have the lyrics pulled up, but I was also primarily working with the music. The beginning of this analysis, I have looked at just the music. We'll be getting into the lyrics next. So even though I understand it's a bit of a shortcoming with how I approach the genre, it's not necessarily on its own terms, I still have a hard time breaking away from it. It's just naturally how I think about music. Or I shouldn't say naturally, I don't know if I was born that way, but it is how it's been crammed into me through lots of education. The musical aspects come first, the lyrics come later. But fortunately, like I said, this song grabs me on the music. This might be the bridge that I need to get into hip hop. And for those who are first time listeners or watchers of my channel, what I refer to when I say a bridge song is when you're trying to introduce somebody to a new genre. You don't want to throw them in the deep end. You don't want to give them the most genre-ish thing that the genre does, like the most black metal thing that you can find or the most bebop thing that you can find, right? That might be what draws you to the genre, right? It might be the epitome of the genre or the highest point, the pinnacle that the genre has to offer, but it's not an acceptable starting point. Most people are not going to enjoy that aspect of it. So what I say about bridge songs are songs that have aspects of the genre, but also incorporate aspects of music that the listener is more inclined to enjoy. Something that's going to help them feel familiar while also engaging with the unfamiliar. If you throw them into completely unfamiliar grounds, it's just not going to be a great listening experience most of the time. So when I come into hip hop and a lot of the music is repetitive and I can't really seem to find ways that the music has themes that tie into the lyrics, it kind of makes it difficult for me to engage with it, right? I really need that crutch, that little bit of help to get into it. And this is where something like Little Simz comes in, where I can engage with the music, where I do think the music helps tie into the lyrical themes, and where I can feel the message of the song without the lyrics. And that right there is going to pull me in. And once I'm in, I'm going to engage with the message of the lyrics, and it's going to be a song that I'm probably going to enjoy. But I needed that little push, that little help, something that felt familiar to me so that it would help me engage with the unfamiliar. And I think bridge songs are very important, especially for harsher genres. Well, not harsher. Harsher genres, definitely when I'm talking about metal. But genres that have their own unique ideas to them, right? Their own musical language. Um, but like, the heavier metals or hip hop, kind of focusing entirely on vocals and a different vocal delivery method than singing, which is common in many genres, or classical or bebop, which kind of tosses a lot of music theory and listenability out the window. Like, these genres, you need to ease people into, I think. And this is true for any genre, but I think especially true for anything that kind of is a very different vibe than some stuff that's closer to the mainstream. And yeah, and like I said, I think this person, Little Simz, might be that bridge artist for me, where there's a lot of musicality. I right now, after hearing this for the second time now, I put them in the same area as Watsky, where there is still a strong emphasis on music, but it does not interfere with, or get in the way of, or detract from the impressive lyricism that goes on in it and vocal delivery as well. So, speaking of vocal delivery and all of that jazz, let's get into the lyrics. So, the song starts off with a repetition of an idea. There's a war, there's a war. And yeah, I think that pairs very nicely with the militaristic snare, with the bombastic, triumphant brass, and with the energetic, driving violins that go on here. Like, there's definitely like the victorious music, right? We have won the war kind of vibe. We're in this, we did it, let's keep moving on kind of idea. We're close to the finish line. We haven't quite won. We don't have the victory music yet, the fanfare, but we do have victorious elements in the music. We are on the cusp of finishing this war, so to speak. Little Simz comes in. She says, "The kingdom's on fire, the blood of a young Messiah. I see sinners in a church. Sometimes I might be introvert. There's a war inside. I hear battle cries, mothers burying sons, young boys playing with guns. The devil's a liar. Fulfill your wildest desires." And yeah, this threw me for a loop. It's kind of all over the place. I want to push further a little bit in here before we go back and look at what's going on. It says, "I don't want to be the one to doctor this, but if you can't feel pain, you can't feel the opposite. The fight between the yin and the yang is a fight you'll never win. I study humans. That makes me an anthropologist, but I'm not in the politics, though I know it's dark times. Part of the world is still living in apartheid. Apartheid." And then she says, if I don't take this winter's flight, that's career suicide. I should have been a friend when your grandma died. I see the illness eat at my aunt. I see her soul rising as her body gets closer to death. So it's all over the place. And it really took me a moment to figure out what's going on here. But it's the mind of somebody whose thoughts go a mile a minute, right? It's stream of consciousness, but it makes sense. Actually, that's exactly it. It's stream of consciousness. The ideas all string together. You might not necessarily see the thread, but there is a unifying idea across all these concepts. It is not that we randomly jumped from a kingdom being on fire to her aunt being on her deathbed. There is a string of concepts that move us all through here. But if you don't catch on to that, it looks chaotic. We talk about a kingdom on fire. That's some external war, right? It says the blood of a young Messiah. I'm not sure how Messiah fits into it, but we're looking at a wounded or dead, young person. She says, "I might be an introvert. There's a war inside. We've moved to internal conflict." Then she comes back out. Mothers are burying sons. Young boys are playing with guns. She says, "I don't want to be the one to doctor this, but you can't feel pain, then you can't feel the opposite, moving back to the inside." Then she says, "I study humans. I'm not into politics, but I know it's dark times, going back to the outside. Parts of the world are still living with apartheid, looking at external issues." Then she takes it back inside. This could be career suicide. And then she takes it personal. Speaking to somebody specific, "I should have been there when your grandma died." And then she shifts to something else. "Oh, my aunt's on her deathbed too." It's just very chaotic movement. And it's interesting to contrast this with Kendrick Lamar. who I think used twice as much space in one of his longest verses to illustrate a single concept. Each verse was looking at pretty much a singular idea and just really looking at the minutia of it, getting to the nitty gritty, the smallest amount of details, really wanting to fully flesh out a single concept before moving on to the next. This is the opposite. This is cramming as many concepts into a verse at one time. And it's interesting to see that there's a decade between these tracks, and I'm curious where this fits in. Is this a pattern kind of vibe? Like I mentioned, I don't have a lot of experience with hip hop. I certainly don't have a lot of experience with rapping in particular, which is what we're looking at here. But I am curious if there was a genre-wide shift in storytelling format, or if this is something more particular to Little Simz. Is this something that helps her stand out from the crowd? You know, attention spans have also changed in the last decade as, you know, different as the younger generation has gotten older, and it could be that this is just how things are with the next generation of rappers, you know? I don't know. I'm curious. No different than, you know, I'm not trying to say one is better than the other. I'm seeing a stark contrast here that also has time between it. And I'm curious if there's a pattern here, or if this is something, you know, specific to a single person's style. This is her voice, so to speak. It's interesting though, because I see more of my own brain in here than I did with Kendrick or Clipping. Those felt like very meticulous writing, more like a novel, right? Or a short story, where each line is specifically crafted to tell or to help embellish on a specific idea. And you didn't move on until the idea was, you know, explored. Very much in the style of George R.R. Martin or J.R.R. Tolkien, where, you know, we see somebody wear a belt and we spend an entire chapter talking about the history of the belt. Like this very intricate, purposeful exploration of ideas, whereas this feels more freeform, right? We're just sort of jumping around ideas, whatever pops up in her head, whatever connection she makes, we're moving with her. And you guys have listened to enough of my off the cuff stream of consciousness rambling. I don't always make sense, I think, all the time, but at least in my brain, I'm making the connections, and I hope you guys can follow along most of the time with them. And there are times when I make strange connections between ideas. You know, hey, they said this, and I thought about this other thing, right? And in fact, you guys often hit me up in the comments giving me out of context quotes that are just hilarious because, you know, outside of the context of the larger conversation, it is a very strange jump that I make sometimes. And, you know, I do kind of, I like this style of rapping a little bit better. But, you know, I'm going to be here to explain a little bit of what's going on. Because if it does seem like jarbled mess that's all over the place, let me fix that. So we start out with external war, right? We literally talk about kingdoms on fire. I don't think it's literal kingdoms on fire. It's more metaphorical ones, but it is the imagery of war. Then we bring that back to the inside where she literally says, I have a war inside. We're keeping this concept of war. Then we take this back out to why there's a war inside, right? She says there's a war inside because she hears battle cries. She sees mothers burying sons. She sees young boys playing with guns, right? Then she says that the devil's a liar. Fulfill your wildest dreams. I don't want to be the one to doctor this, but if you can't feel pain, you can't feel the opposite. She says that the path is what you need to take in order to reap your rewards. We were talking about this in the music, about having the resolution and then the tension, and the resolution and tension. You have to have that tension for the resolution to have impact. And she's saying that if you want to you know, feel the rewards of going through a journey, you have to go over the hurdles. You need to do the journey itself. If you can't feel pain, so if you kind of take the shortcuts, like the devil says, he says, so fulfill your wildest dreams, you're not going to feel the reward, right? You're not going to understand the point of it. She says she studies humans and that makes her an anthropologist, but she's not into politics. But she knows that it's dark times. So she takes us back to the inside. And from here, we flip it over to the fact that she understands people, she says, and that she understands that people are in a dark place. You know, a lot of people come to her with pain. She takes that and pushes it back to the outside. What are these people's pain? She says, we're living in dark times. Now, interestingly, I don't quite see the thread here, but I see the point here. She flips it over and says, I should have been a friend when your grandma died. So she's speaking to somebody specifically, and then she says, I see the illness eat my aunt, and she's getting closer to her death. So she says, you know, I'm feeling sympathy now, right? I'm in your position where you were. A relative of mine is on their deathbed. I wasn't there for you, and I hope you're here for me. And, you know, it kind of sucks that I wasn't there for you. I apologize for that. You know, knowing how it feels on the other side, I wish, I want someone to be there for me. And in your case, that should have been my job to be there for you. So it comes back to the idea it comes back to an idea we'll look at in a moment about unity and doing things together and being there for each other. And maybe that's kind of tied into the idea of knowing that it's dark times because that's the way to get out of it, right? We hit the chorus though, says, find a way, I'll find a way, the world's not over. I'll make it, don't you cry, in God we trust, because you're not alone, right? So it's this thing of unity. The world isn't over. It looks grim, but we're in this together and we're going to fix it, right? That's what the chorus says to me. Verse 2 comes back and says, I need a license to feel internal wounds and I'm not trying to be healed. So bringing it back to the idea that she has a war inside, right? That's what this whole opening is. It says, I sabotage what we're trying to build because of feelings I keep inside, but it's time to reveal. And man, this line hits me because there's actually, I haven't tried to sabotage this channel yet, and I'm really hoping I don't ever do that. I think I've got a good thing going here. Really haven't had any thoughts for it, but you know, it's something that I've done in the past. Subconsciously or maybe consciously, I've decided I don't want to do something anymore, or I need to ruin it before it goes bad because eventually it's going to go bad. So why wait for that? Just kind of kill it off now kind of idea. And, you know, I have prematurely ended what were probably good things for me, right? So I really love this line where she, you know, confesses this to the world. You know, this song is 2.6 million views. And she says, you know, I'm somebody who has messed up my own success in the past. That's a big thing to say, right? And she says she does it because of feelings she's kept inside, and that's what it always is, right? Feelings of not having earned what you have, or feelings that you're going to ruin it eventually, or, you know, whatever. Something has told you it's better to destroy what you have than let it continue on. Again, a real big thing to admit. And then she says, I hate the thought of just being a burden. I hate that these conversations have surfaced. So we've taken this idea of the back and forth, the external versus the internal. And the whole point of verse 1 is to show that they're one and the same, right? The external affects the internal. We have a war inside because of our surroundings. We are who we are based on our environment. So in this case, the way I think about it is that she has a lot of mental and emotional stress and issues that she needs to deal with and that she wants to deal with. And they're because of the world around her, because of the wars we're waging outside. It's forcing us to also wage wars inside. And we're going to tie this back into the music in a little bit. I have a really neat thing there. She says, Simz the artist or Simbi the person? To you, I'm smiling, but really I'm hurting. And so we have a little bit of idea here where it's, you know, she has two sides. She has her front-facing public side and then her internal side that she keeps a bit more private. And I think a lot of people can relate to this. You know, the idea of putting up a front, of putting up a mask to be someone you're not. But I think that especially in her case, having at least 300,000 fans on YouTube, probably more on Spotify, And winning awards and whatnot. I don't know if she's won any awards yet, but definitely a big artist. You have to present a specific version of yourself, I would imagine. And it's not going to be, I mean, it's kind of like Instagram influencers, right? Where I don't know if she necessarily has to present her best self, but she has to present a brand. Little Simz, the artist, or Simbi, the person. Little Simz, the artist, is a brand. Whether, however she wants to go about looking at it, it's not everything that she is, it's specific aspects of who she is. And sometimes aspects that she's not, that she incorporates into her artistic side, even though they might not be exactly who she is. The song is called Introvert, and there's lines in here about her being an introverted person, but she's out here singing about these things, being very public about them, dancing in groups. It is a very extroverted display. The character Simz the artist is not the same as the person Simbi. So yeah, I think that more so than the average person who probably already does this on a smaller level, artists typically do have to have a very harsh divide, or a very large divide, I should say, larger than the average person, of their presented self versus their internal. And I'm glad that she brings it up. She even says, directly, it's not just the divide itself, it's that I'm smiling on the outside, but I'm hurting on the inside. She goes, I'm left wondering how I even feel, but was it even worth it? I bottle up and then spill it in verses. So, she even says that she's not dealing with her mental or emotional issues properly. She doesn't talk about them. She doesn't go see a therapist or anything like that. She just bottles it up until it's ready to overflow. And instead of venting at a friend, she puts it in words and turns it into art. But she even says that that's not a great way to go about it. The next line is, one day I'm wordless and the next day I'm a wordsmith. Having this sort of emotional and mental toil is not great for creative output. Having that sort of stress on you is not going to be something that helps you perform and create stuff. And she directly acknowledges that. She says she's close to success, but to happiness, I'm the furthest, bringing back the idea of Simz versus Simbi. It says, at night I wonder if my tears will dry on their own, hoping I will fulfill Amy's purpose. I mean, other than saying that she sometimes cries herself to sleep, which I think just ties into all of the unhappiness that she's presenting in this section, I don't know who Amy is. Maybe someone from another song or another album. But we bring in this next concept, which I think is very awesome. She says, Angel says, don't let your ego be a disturbance, but your inner demon says, dude, you've earned this. Right? It's imposter syndrome right there. Has she earned who she is, where she is fame-wise? I went and looked at her albums. Her first two albums were done before she was picked up by the AWAL label. They did not trend on charts. I don't know how big they were. They don't even have Wikipedia entries. So, for all I know, they were, EPs that she released on Bandcamp or something, right? Once she got picked up by AWAL, she did Gray Area, which was the album before this, and Sometimes It Might Be Introvert, which was from this album. And Gray Area did all right. It hit 87 on the UK charts. Sometimes It Might Be Introvert hit 4. So she went from nothing at all in the charts to topping them. And yeah, imposter syndrome can be real, can be very real when you make a big jump from like that, But here we start to push this back to the outside. This whole thing is about how the internal conflicts affect the external conflicts, which then affect the internal conflicts. She says that all of this is like they strip you of everything you're deserving. You got to realize this is a prison in us. Those outside who are telling us we don't deserve this are creating an internal prison, right? The reason I think maybe I haven't earned this is because other people have put that voice in my head. That's what she's saying. She says we are conditioned like this. It's like we can't sleep until our spirits are crushed. And now she's going to look at more external things. How much fighting must we do? We've seen broken homes, poverty, corrupt government officials, lies, atrocities. They're talking about the economy being threatened. They knock down our communities just to make new properties. She talks about how all these external things that she doesn't have any control over are ruining her external her environment, right? And they're negatively affecting her mental state, which is negatively affecting the external things around her, her environment, right? Even bringing this back to the idea that she wasn't there for her friends when their grandmother passed, I think might have been what that topic was about. It could be that she just wasn't in a place to provide that support at the time because of environmental triggers, right? She could have not been in a place to be a support person, and maybe she needed support at the same time. So, yeah, it's cyclical is what this whole thing is about, which brings us back to the triumph, the tension. The triumph, it's cyclical. Having the strength to move on, getting knocked back down. Having the strength to move on, getting knocked back down. External stuff, fighting internal stuff, creating external stuff, fighting internal stuff. It's all cyclical. She says, even I'm directly affected. She says, my speech isn't involuntary, projecting intention straight from my lungs. She says that the things I say, the words I choose, are of my own volition. And I make this art with the very breath I breathe, the very air I breathe. It is a very powerful moment right there. Says, I'm a black woman and I'm proud, and I'm a proud one. We walk in blind faith, not knowing the outcome, but as long as we're unified, then we've already won. And we bring this back to the idea of unity. The first verse ended with, I should have been there for you. The second verse ends with, we will be there for each other. And I like how it says we walk in blind faith, not knowing the outcome. We don't know if our fight is going to yield results. We don't know if the world is going to change so that we don't have corrupt politicians and lies and people's communities being destroyed so that we can build, apartments or office complexes or whatever. Stadiums and parking lots, parks ruined so that we can put pavement and concrete there. We don't know if we are actually going to make change, but we have to have that blind faith. We have to keep going in hopes that our efforts will change things. And it says, as long as we're unified, as long as they don't separate us, we've won. Our greatest powers are numbered, defendant numerous. Power in numbers, strength in numbers. We have to stay unified on this. And right after this moment, there's also a play on words there. As long as we're unified, then we've already won. We're already won. I like that. Right after this moment, we go back into the chorus, which ends with the idea of we'll make it because we're not alone. Just continuing to drive this idea home that this is something we must do together. We move into the bridge, which is where there's words here. It says sometimes I can be an introvert, feels like I can be an introvert, right? And this whole thing kind of comes through in sort of a musical way. I don't necessarily hear it, the words so much. It's kind of these ethereal sounds kind of going around. It's a neat way of working the lyrics into the music. This is also the part where I said it was very introspective. We had the flute come in, and the strings that were kind of showcasing that more calming side from the chorus. And I think this is the self-care part of the song. I think that's how this kind of works here, where we have the intensity and momentum and bombastic elements of the fight, right? Continuing to do what we believe we need to do to make this place better for everyone, but we can't constantly be in that state of mind. We need to find peace and meditate and relax. Otherwise, it is a constant attack on our psyche. We will become mentally and emotionally fatigued, and that will eventually drip over into our physical fatigue, where we can no longer work towards our goals. And I think it's really interesting to have this stark separation, which is where, earlier I had said that I didn't like the transition from the verse into the chorus, that it was too stark, but I think it works. It is intended to compartmentalize the two ideas, right? Moving towards our goals has to be very different from relaxing, and we need to be able to do both. They're both extremely important. So yeah, and then we move into the outro, which it says it's an outro by Emma Corrin, which I did notice it was a different vocal here. Sorry, a different person speaking, but I don't know who Emma Corrin is. I don't know if I'm supposed to know who that is. It says, and so it begins. The bass is an amalgamation of everything. Rules are not to be played by rebels. The story of never ending. Your introversion led you here. Intuition protected you along the way. Feelings allowed you to be well balanced, and perspective gave you foresight. I absolutely love how this section starts with a delay, right? The first voice kicks in, and like a beat and a half later, it comes in a second time, and we get this kind of fuzzy warbling kind of thing going on. Up until and perspective gave you foresight, in which case they come together, and by the first syllable of foresight, we get a doubling in center channel. And it is perspective giving you foresight. It's this focusing of ideas. I love the way that comes through. It says the top of the mountain is nothing without the climb, going back to the idea of the devil fulfilling your wildest dreams. You can't feel pain, then you can't feel the opposite. You need to go through the journey to reap the rewards. And that's what she says again. The top of the mountain is nothing without the climb. Only the strong will survive. Here we come back to the idea of companionship. Alone, but not lonely, right? I love how this concept continues to get introduced throughout this track. And I think that this line in particular was probably very powerful in April of 2021. Just coming off of 2020, a lot of us, had just come out of quarantine. Maybe some countries were still doing quarantine. And I think being told that you might be alone physically, but not lonely, that there are other people who sympathize with you, who empathize with you, who are in this thing together with you, would have been a really powerful line at the time. Interestingly, though, we end the song with, your truth unveils with time as you embark on a journey of what it takes to be a woman. And up until this point, I feel like the song is rather universal. It's very strange, yet very cool for a single line of a song to completely alter my entire perception of what it's about. But yeah, this right here. So, like I said, this thing's been kind of universal, right? We have an overview of external stressors, right? And I think a lot of people can see them. A lot of people sympathize and agree that these are problems. They need to be addressed. We have internal issues, right? And while not everybody might be able to relate to them, I do in a lot of cases. There's definitely the sympathetic idea that this is something a lot of people deal with, and even if I don't personally deal with them, it's something that a lot of people can relate to, or at least empathize with. Then we get to the very end, though, and it's less universal. It says this is where you go on a journey to figure out what it takes to be a woman. And this seems to be a bit more directed, and I think it's interesting because it puts a third layer on this track. The first layer is about looking at the things that, are problems in our world, right? And how they can affect us. The second layer is Little Simz, or even more particularly Simbi in this case, revealing a bit more about herself, right? She speaks about specific issues she has, and while she's held on to them many times in the past, she is letting it go for once. Letting people understand that she might not be the perfect artist that she might present herself as, that there is a person behind the icon, a person behind the brand. So it's a way for her to showcase the way that she perceives the world as a human, as a fully fleshed out character, fully fleshed out person, not a character who raps, this brand that she's created. But on the third level, I think it's really cool that she presents herself as somebody to be a role model to people who might be in a position emotionally that she is in. Right? Imagine you're a 20-something woman who also deals with a lot of these problems where the external environment gets them down and they feel like they can't do anything. They self-sabotage everything they work on. They're never there for their friends and they feel very alone. And she comes up here and says, look, I felt like you before. In fact, I still do. But I find ways to keep moving forward. One foot in front of the other. You have to keep the fight up. It's not so much about global issues anymore or even personal issues. It's about encouraging people to continue taking a step forward. That militaristic march at the beginning, the cyclical idea of resolution and tension is not about anything specific. It's about the idea of just making progress towards anything. There will be hurdles. You will fail. You have to get back up. You need to reach that home point, that resolution again, and take that next step. She says, I've been there, I've been through it, I'm still going through it, but I continue to take steps and look where I'm at. You know, you can be like me. I'm no different than you are, right? I am not the icon Little Simz. I'm also Simbi. I have these problems. I go through imposter syndrome, you know? I have these same problems that everyone else does. I'm just a regular old person. Let me be a path for you to take. Your walk on this life as a young woman or a 20-something woman or a 50-year-old woman or an 80-year-old woman, anybody who, or even men, I suppose, you know, anybody who feels like they have, who feels like they're still lost. I have walked the road. The road you need to walk is no longer unpaved. I've put a street towards it. You know, I've put a path there. Walk the path with me, right? Just make sure you keep putting one foot in front of the other. It's a very powerful message, and it's very cool to hear this song on 3 levels, where the third level is sort of like a key. I didn't even know the song had a lock on it, but she gave me a key at the end, and I said, hey, how's this fit into it? You search a little bit, you find a lock, you unlock it, and bam, there's this third layer to it. Beautiful, amazing stuff. And the way that it works against and within and just supported by the music in every level, it's just a real wonderful track. I'm glad you guys showed me this. Yeah, I guess this is where you guys come in. Hit me up in the comments. Let me know what you thought of this track, anything that stood out to you. Let me know about my reading of it. You know, anything that you'd like to add to the conversation, right? Above the comments, there's a description box, and there's a link for Linktree. There's a link for Linktree. That's not Linktree, but we'll do it anyways. If you could, like, subscribe, or ring the bell. Those buttons are above the description box, but in the description box is a link for Linktree. In there, you can pick up some merch. You can join the Discord. You can join follow me on Twitter. Join the Patreon. Help support the channel while also getting the ability to vote on future themes and songs. There's just a bunch of links in there. Even aside from that, you can check out the music I've listened to or that I'm making. Just like a lot of stuff. Go ahead and check it out. All right. I'm kind of flustered because like my whole outro's been rearranged because the program felt like doing its own thing. We have a special selection that is probably over by now. If you had watched it when it came out, probably looking about 30-40 minutes. Came out about 24 minutes ago, so it's only anyways. Special selection also released while this was going on. Go check that out. Otherwise, I'll be back tomorrow, 5 p.m. Eastern Standard Time, 9 p.m. UTC. As usual, we'll be looking at more hip-hop music and our final special selection for the week. Until next time, remember to be critical but not cynical of the music you listen to, and have a fantastic morning, afternoon, or evening, whenever you choose to watch my videos.